Little Red Riding Hood. There once was a sweet and happy little girl whose granny had made her a lovely red cape with a hood. The little girl loved it so much that she wore it everywhere she went. Soon everyone became so used to her wearing it that they named her Little Red Riding Hood. "Little Red Riding Hood," said her mother one morning, "Granny is not feeling very well. Take her this basket of food and see if you can cheer her up." Little Red Riding Hood loved to visit her granny, so she took the basket of food and set off right away. "Go straight to Granny's house and don't talk to any strangers," her mother called after her. "Don't worry," sang Little Red Riding Hood as she went merrily on her way. Little Red Riding Hood skipped off through the woods. The sun was shining, the birds were chirping in the treetops, and she didn't have a care in the world. Very soon she met a wolf. "Well, hello there," said the wolf in a silky, low voice. "And where are you off to on this fine morning?" "I'm going to visit my granny," replied Little Red Riding Hood, forgetting her mother's warning. "She's not feeling well, and I'm taking her this food to make her better." The wolf licked his lips. "Where does your dear old granny live?" asked the wolf. "She lives in a cottage at the other side of the woods," replied Little Red Riding Hood. "It has pretty roses growing around the door." "That's so," said the wolf. "Why, it sounds lovely." There were some beautiful wild flowers growing in the woods, and Little Red Riding Hood stopped to admire them. "Why don't you pick a pretty bunch of flowers for your granny?" suggested the wolf. Little Red Riding Hood thought that was a good idea and stooped down to pick some. As she was busy choosing the prettiest flowers, the wolf strolled away down the path. His tummy rumbled loudly. At the end of the path, he saw a cottage with roses growing around the door, just as Little Red Riding Hood had said. The wicked old wolf knocked on the door. "Come right in, my darling," called the grandmother, thinking that it was Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf walked into the cottage. Before the grandmother had a chance to call for help, the wicked creature opened his huge jaws and swallowed her whole. Then he climbed into her bed, pulled the covers up under his chin, and waited. Soon Little Red Riding Hood reached her granny's house with her basket of food and a beautiful bunch of wild flowers. "Won't Granny be pleased to see me?" she thought as she knocked on the door. "Come right in, my darling," replied a strange, croaky voice. "Poor Granny," thought Little Red Riding Hood. "She doesn't sound at all well." Little Red Riding Hood looked in the kitchen, but her granny wasn't there. She looked in the sitting room, but her granny wasn't there either. Finally, she went into her granny's bedroom, and she gasped in surprise. "Granny!" exclaimed Little Red Riding Hood. "Your ears are absolutely enormous." "All the better to hear you with, my dear," replied a low, sulky voice. "And your eyes are as big as saucers," gulped Little Red Riding Hood. "All the better to see you with," replied a rumbling, growly voice. "And your teeth are so pointed," gasped Little Red Riding Hood. "All the better to eat you with," snarled a loud, hungry voice. The wicked old wolf leapt out of the bed and gobbled up Little Red Riding Hood in one big gulp. Then he lay down on the bed and fell fast asleep. Luckily, a woodcutter was working nearby, and he heard some very loud and growly snoring sounds coming from the little cottage. "I don't like the sound of that," he thought. With his axe at the ready, he crept into the grandmother's house. He tiptoed into the bedroom and found the wolf fast asleep, but his tummy bulging fit to burst. "You wicked old wolf!" cried the woodcutter. "What have you done?" He tipped the wolf upside down and shook him as hard as he could. Out fell a very dazed Little Red Riding Hood, followed by her poor old granny. "It was so dark in there," cried the little girl. "Thank you for saving us." But Little Red Riding Hood's granny was furious. She chased the wolf out of her bedroom, through the cottage, and out into the woods. The woodcutter and Little Red Riding Hood followed close behind her. The wolf never returned, and Little Red Riding Hood never spoke to strangers ever again. The end.